And Shuli, so we've heard from Seyi. Can you tell us a little bit about what your role is with LF Energy and kind of what you guys' mission is?
Makes me want to stand up too. Also, I want to turn the lights up. It's like I want to see who we're all talking about and who we're talking with. About 26 months ago, I walked into the Linux Foundation and I asked them that I was looking for Switzerland. And I had just recently finished doing some work with the PUC and with the 3 IOUs in California around defining the strategy and plan for the implementation of TOU and time of use. And so I walked in and Mike Dolan, the VP of Strategic Programs, said to me, well, that's actually what a lot of people ask for when they come here. And you know, my background is not in power systems, but I'm an innovation scholar, and before that, I'm a digital first person. So what Linux Foundation Energy is about creating that neutral environment for collaboration, for pre-competitive competition, or a pre-competitive collaboration, things that we can do together that we actually cannot do alone. And I think that almost every single panel that has been up here, people have kind of referenced, gosh, we really need this neutral place. We need some place where we can collaborate. So we have been building this initiative, and we have, the Linux Foundation really is a code-first organization, so we have a number of code bases that have been put in. One called Operator Fabric, which is really around the control room of the future. Another one called Let's Coordinate, which is around boundary management. These applications absolutely can form the foundation for water, electricity, transportation, waste, everything. They can be, they're open source and they're a control platform. Possible, which is a planning and simulation software. And we're about to and REAPS, which is a distributed control platform for microgrids. And so we're also about to set up an open data project that is both for interoperability and also creating data lakes and data vaults for really being able to accelerate innovation. And what I think is important to recognize is that we are not inventing this here. The Linux Foundation Energy sits inside of an ecosystem. LF Networking, which is a comparable project in the telco space, 70% of mobile traffic is collaborating together on 5G. And I believe that we have a tremendous amount of urgency, and it's and I really ask people, what side of history do you want to be on? I think Greta is a star, and I am so excited for what's happened today. And it's really through her and from her and in my own relationship to my own grandchildren that I really recognized I absolutely cannot sit here and do nothing. Mm-hmm. I absolutely have to figure out how I can do something, even if it is incredibly hard. And I think trying to change the utility industry is pretty darn difficult.
Well, thank you, Shuli. And before we get into talking more particularly about some of those projects, I wanted to ask, and Seyi, maybe you can give us your thoughts on this first, really how the changing customer landscape is driving the need for more flexibility and adaptability in deploying solutions.
Yeah, so the pace of change is for the 40 or so years I've been alive, the pace of change now feels faster than it's ever been. And I would suggest that the companies that will succeed can do two things well. React in real time to what customers are saying or asking for or doing. And the second type of company that will succeed because of that pace are the ones who start to predict what the customers will need. And a few things have been mentioned here. But in either of those two scenarios for success, you have to, and our company, we're looking at Operator Fabric as sort of a base foundation for the operational software that we're going to be deploying on some of the pilots we have. But we're taking what's been learned over 10, 20, 30 years or so of open source collaboration on the software side to apply it to approaches of either reacting quickly to what customers are doing, buying devices that we didn't expect to come on the grid a few years ago, on the electricity side. On the water side, the mistakes we made before for example, chlorine in some of the water that, with organic components in the water, caused some problems that we didn't expect. We can now, with the technology we have, predict what those possible problems will be and deploy assets to prevent those sort of situations happening. So reacting quickly and predicting what the problems will be using tools and techniques we've used in the past with the technology the advanced technology we have now, I think is a path. Yeah.
And Shuli, any additional thoughts kind of like on that rate of change that the industry is currently seeing?
Well, so we created sweatshirts to give all of our founding members, and it's when Ohm's law meets Moore's law. And, and you know, I think that the essence is that we're going to have to figure out how to move more quickly than we've ever been able to move before. Now, you know, the good part is, you know, when you look at sort of the life cycle of projects within the Linux Foundation. So Linux Foundation is the home of the Linux operating system. The Linux operating system, the kernel, runs basically everything that you see here. And, you know, not necessarily our laptops, but if you've got a Google phone, it runs Android, and it is what makes the world work. 98% of all servers are the Linux operating system. So, you know, the pace of change is extraordinarily fast, and it's not going to slow down. And I think that we have a convergence of two things, which is the speed of change and the digitalization of energy, which does not mean that you can move electrons like packets, but that we need to be communicating about the process or the energy that is being moved and tracking the flow of electricity and the ability to be able to move hardware out to the edge, including electric vehicles, and then support that in an orchestration platform. So it's going to continue to move fast, and we don't like to talk about climate change in the United States very much for a whole variety of different reasons, but the truth is we're absolutely completely screwed. And when you want to talk about water and electricity, the fact is by 2030, which is a very short period of time, we are not going to have a single glacier left in the United States. Now, that is going to affect water. And by any measure, the estimates is that the water tables are going to go down by 15% all over North America once those glaciers are gone. And that's just North America. There are other parts of the world that are completely and entirely dependent upon glaciers. Those glaciers are going to be completely gone by 2050. So if that doesn't speed change, I don't know what will.
And so we just recently talked off stage, and you brought up this idea of collaborative innovation, something that we've heard pretty consistently throughout the discussion so far. So from your perspective, especially when we're looking at other industries undergoing technological transformation, how have you seen collaborative innovation be successful, and can you kind of speak to how that can help us move forward through some of these challenges?
I would love to. It is the thing that I am absolutely the most passionate about in the world. So what makes the Linux Foundation so absolutely, utterly exceptional is that it is a pre-competitive environment. So you can have somebody like Google put Kubernetes in, and you can have the entire world build together the cloud. And you can have interoperability between AWS, Azure, and the Google platforms and the IBM platforms. And so, you know, that kind of innovation is incredibly accelerated. The project that I think that is most closely aligned with energy, and I think shortly behind, you know, and I think of water as, you know, absolutely an integral part of the energy equation, is telecommunications. And what happened with telecommunications was that AT&T spent about 28 months recognizing that they had a commitment to 75% virtualization. And I think that, if you are in the energy and the water space, the notion of actually shifting to 75% virtualization, what that meant was that they were moving to software-defined networks. And that those software-defined networks were going to allow them to scale. But their BHAG, or their burning platform, was 5G. And they knew that there was not even the remotest possibility that they were going to get to 5G alone. Nor was it going to actually work if there were 25 or 30 or 50 different 5Gs. So I think that what's remarkable is the ability to actually. So AT&T put in their software-defined networking platform and their network function virtualization platform. They worked together with China Mobile. Okay, China Mobile and AT&T built the foundations of the software for 5G. And the reason why it works is because you have all eyes on the prize. And one of the things that is incredibly difficult is the degree to which we, because of the fear of bad actors, want to exclude people from our ecosystems. And one of the things that's totally remarkable about the Linux Foundation is the inclusion of everybody. That if you do and you do well, and you are a good participant in an ecosystem, you can scale. So they started with 9 members. 18 months later, they had 180. Now they have 70% of mobile traffic. I had the good fortune of sitting at the table with NTT Docomo, who is going to probably bring that number up to 80% in a breakfast that we had the day before yesterday. And NTT Docomo actually really wants to look at the energy space because there is a blurring of edges. And so the reason why telecommunication is so instructive to energy is not just the hardware piece or the BHAG piece, but it's that there is a blurring between water, energy, electrification, of transportation. All of these things are blurring. And so I think we need environments where we can collaborate together because those innovations have to occur with the integration of all of those things, that diversity.
Shay, thoughts on other industries that you're seeing undergoing technological transformation that we can pull at least innovative ideas from?
I think healthcare is one, despite the perceptions of what the insurance dynamic does to healthcare in the US and provision of healthcare. You do see in places where telepresence, for example. Telepresence is something that in countries, not the US, where they didn't really have as much access before, they're leapfrogging the US in being able to provide that service to customers where they are. And I use that even though the healthcare industry and we deliver a physical, we deliver a product to people in physical spaces, either water or electricity. I do think the willingness of that industry to start to do things differently, the culture of, you know what, this might not be working anymore, let's do something else, is a big part of what we miss in this industry. We talk about it a lot. I sit on panels, I give presentations, and then you step out of the hall and have conversations with folk within the industry, and not much happens. We need to start borrowing a little bit more. I mentioned the designer thing. A few years ago, most utilities could have captured the storage market in terms of the Powerwall type products if they'd thought about the human approach to what we need. Technology is global, but we're very local. I want power in my home right now. Some people will provide that storage with beautifully designed products that charge you, that cost you more than you would pay for anything the utility provides you. I had a slide up there. We pay 300 times what we pay for water coming out of our taps from when we buy bottled water. the utilities struggle to say, you know what, how can we attach to this branded approach of water to sell our own? So healthcare, but then the broader point I'm trying to make here is we just need a different way of thinking about what's happening in other industries and borrowing from it to very closely match the needs of the customers we have, the digital customers we now have, yeah.
Well, one of the things about open source is that it allows the end user to contribute to and influence the design of the system. Why is that important, or why is that transformational for electric and water utilities?
Well, so LF Energy is a membership organization. And so it's very important to have, end users like utilities, at the IOUs, munis, co-ops, transmission system operators, distribution system operators, as well as vendors, both in the incumbent vendors. And it's very difficult for the incumbent vendors to participate. Although I have one that I'm working very, very hard on to convert. But it's very difficult because they don't want to let go of their old products. Mm-hmm. And they literally are willing to throw the planet under their wheel in order to hold on to their products. And so what that means is that, this leapfrog to AI, you can't do it with Fortran. And you can't do it with those old products. And so what we need is the requirements and the kind of collective wisdom of the crowd to be able to build the power system planning and simulation and design software, because that software, along with an interoperable data model, actually is going to allow us to create machine learning. And, we have a fantasy here in California. Just because we said we were going to go to 100% decarbonization in 2045, unless we find a way to collaborate, it's not going to happen. Because what we're doing is we're building new silos. And then if you have a wind farm that just all of a sudden goes out of business, then you actually have to go in there and you have to rip out all of the software and put in all new software. And we cannot move quickly enough using proprietary software. That does not mean that there aren't trillions of dollars to be made here. And those trillions of dollars should be worth something. And I want the incumbent vendors to participate. So I don't remember what the question was, but that was the answer.
It was around why it's important that open source does allow the end user to contribute to and influence
well, just think about the internet, okay? It's exactly. Like if it had stayed with Sun and NT as the only way that you could build a website, we would not be where we are today. Yeah. So you do not have to look any farther for a kind of case history than that. But it's this is, rapid iterative design. The other thing is that most of the products that the vendors have built have not been built on microservices. And so they're not using a continuous integration, continuous deployment environment. Yeah. And we have to be able to move to CI/CD. Mm-hmm. There's a new foundation that's been set up. I think Google seeded the code to it, which is the CD Foundation, in order to have really rapid design. And those rapid designs are being driven by end users and by the needs of end users. And so using microservices as opposed to, we're going to have a behemoth architecture, and once we do that, or once you buy our entire suite of a gazillion applications, you will be completely locked in for the next 150 years to us. And if you can't switch. So all of those things all point to open source and being able to create interoperability that drives the value of the customer.
Yeah, Seyi, go ahead. I know this is something we talk about, trying to avoid silos and the more efficient use of flowing of data within enterprises. So
yeah, and the opportunity to use open source platforms enables people who would traditionally not engage in this space to come in. Because the power and the water industry, we have employees with skill sets that are very quickly becoming obsolete if we think about the broader picture of where technology is going. Fortran is still being used in some places in this industry. I do not know anyone under the age of 40 who knows how to code in Fortran.
60.
I'm just being super nice here. And so if we want to be participants and contributors in the future, and companies want to capture value in this utility industry that we see today, and the one that's coming ahead of us, we will have to adopt these approaches to bring in non-traditional innovators, employees who want a cause to work on. People care about sustainability. We just need to package it in a way or use tools and messaging that allows them to be participants as everything changes around us.
You know, part of what I love, in case you haven't noticed, I really love the Linux Foundation. We just came from a 3-day summit, and I was just blown away. But one of the things I really love is that we train millions of developers a year.
Yeah.
So what you're describing is that, you know, if we want to engage people, we also have to be able to train them. And we have to be able to make it really easy to train developers all over the world to really build the systems of the future that are going to enable the kind of, you know, to facilitate the water energy
transformation, nexus, yeah.
And to attract a whole new generation of developers. And, you know, my kind of call to arms is that I'm looking for 10,000 developers.
You just mentioned that.
And it was inspired by your article, you know, really acknowledging that 50% of, you know, American utility employees are going to retire in the next 5 years. And so we do not want to try and replace them with the same people who are leaving. We want to replace them with folks that are actually really able to build the grid of the future and the integrated systems of the future. We built silos. Water and energy were built as a silo, unless you're in Brazil and you have an abundance of water.
Well, we're out of time, but thank you both for joining me to have this conversation. I encourage everybody in the room to try to continue this conversation throughout the day with both Shuli and Seyi. So please join me in thanking our panelists for a great conversation.